What's up, fam of Liberty? It's your boy, Big Sarge, and it's Friday, so your weekend safety brief is actually doubly important today because of the protests that are happening this weekend, plus the alleged deadline for the Trump administration to release its findings on invoking the Insurrection Act, which many people fear could be the start of martial law in this country. So, up front, all the cutesy, funny shit aside, like if you're gonna swim, make sure you use protection. If you're gonna have sex, don't do it alone, or don't run with scissors, or don't make toast in the bathtub, or even the serious maxims like don't drink and drive. I also want to say that when you're attending protests, have a plan to get out quickly if fuck shit goes down. Know your escape routes, know where your friends are, watch for agitators of any political bent, not just the Proud Boys or whatever stupid name they're going by now, but also left-wing agitators. Make sure your protests are peaceful. Stay together with your friends and family and look for the helpers. If fuck shit does start to go down, let the authorities handle it and get the hell away from the action. Unless it's everybody shutting it down by circling up and driving the agitator out peacefully. If the authorities are the ones starting the fuck shit, then you definitely need to get the hell away ASAP. Your immediate priority when going to a protest is always going to be to get home safely. The next big protest that the Sons of Liberty will be participating in will be the June 6th D-Day protests. We'll be partnering up with a lot of left-wing organizations and veterans organizations to put our boots on the ground in as many locations as possible. Again, provided nobody's invoked martial law by then and has tried to crack down like totalitarian fascists. We'll be driving the June 6th narrative after this weekend. For those of you that are just joining the Sons of Liberty, you need to get on our Discord server and start the process of getting vetted so that we can get you into our private signal groups. All month long during the month of April, which is now half over, we're doing a crowdfunding campaign on IndieGoGo to crowdfund a year-long documentary web series on the American Civil War. I know some people have unfollowed the Sons of Liberty because, despite plenty of warnings in advance, they were salty about the fact that we don't talk about just politics 24/7. I've mentioned before that I'm an indie filmmaker. An award-winning indie filmmaker. I gotta make sure I shamelessly brag about that. And not only am I an indie filmmaker and a history buff, but I'm also the great-great-great-grandson of the Secretary of the Treasury of the Confederacy, George Alfred Trenholm. He was one of the top Confederacy officials and allegedly was the inspiration for the character Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. And for most of the first half of my life, there was this bullshit narrative pushed in educational facilities and social gatherings. I'll talk about that in a minute, but first I want to touch on relevance. Why, with everything going on today, would I choose to spend time on this? First and foremost, I'm not a one-trick pony or a one-dimensional person. I have a wide range of interests, but also, I just need a fucking break, mentally and emotionally. And so do you. Don't let these motherfuckers terrorize you 24/7. That's how they win. We could all use a little diversion from the constant hellscape, real-life horror movie that we're living through. But the times in which we find ourselves have a lot of parallels to the events of 165 years ago. For example, in the 1850s, rich conservative slave-owning oligarchs began organizing to take over the U.S. government and to create an oligarchy that would make slavery a nationwide phenomenon. U.S. Secretary of War Jefferson Davis helped spearhead this, and he went so far as to have allied U.S. military officers shuffled into a single unit where they could all be trained together. Among them were officers named Braxton Bragg and Robert E. Lee. They were also prepared to sever ties with the United States and to break away if their plans failed. Now, Northerners hadn't paid attention to this slow accumulation of power, nor did they take note of the subtle shift in who is being placed in position where. Consequently, when laws were passed in 1854 overturning the Missouri Compromise that kept slavery out of the West, it was a massive shock. And then this ultimately gave rise to a loose coalition of anti-slavery blocs within the U.S. government who just barely managed to squeak by on putting a stop to it. It also resulted in Abraham Lincoln being elected, and a bunch of butthurt slave-owning oligarchs put into motion their plan to secede. This is relevant to the political climate today because just look at what's going on in this country, what's been going on in this country for the past decade alone, and that's just for starters. I know a lot of people right now are comparing where we are with the rise of fascism in Italy and Nazi Germany, but the truth is, we sped that rise along on roads that we paved with asphalt and painted the lane lines long ago. And in fact, Hitler studied the history of the United States and how it could dehumanize a free people by making them other. There's a segment of this population that cries about their belief that statues of slave-owning traitors being taken down is somehow erasing history. Now make a Venn diagram of the people saying that we have to get rid of DEI, erase these DEI people from government websites, and we have to get rid of critical race theory, and we have to stop talking about the Civil War because it makes little kids sad when they go to school. That Venn diagram would probably be a perfect circle. That was not a perfect circle, but you know what I mean. And on the subject of schools, I'm not even going to touch the countless hundreds of thousands of people who grew up learning the same history that I did in a school down south, where it was said that the war was just a disagreement about how to govern, that it was about states' rights, the right to what specifically was never actually covered. They told us that slavery wasn't that bad, and that white masters cared for their slaves and treated them very well, taught them to read and write, saved them from being savages, slaves were happy and sang songs out in the fields, garbage like that. I'm not even going to touch that, but countless Americans grew up believing that. And we're shipping a lot of people out of this country into concentration camps in another country. And there's strong evidence that these people are being put to work in prison work camps. Not only that, but the propaganda is already spinning up. Just yesterday, we saw a senator finally manage to meet face-to-face with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Kilmar is alive. He was cleaned up and dressed up, but that's not how prisoners are living. And more importantly, El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukaki, shared some photoshopped picture of Kilmar and the senator drinking margaritas, and in typical deluded fashion, the Reich wing, yes, I said the Reich wing, is eating that shit up and passing it around like it's a barracks bunny on a Friday night in the barracks. But more importantly than any of that, Americans, usually conservative and usually white people, have this really bad habit of whitewashing history and acting like what's going on today, right now, at this very moment in this country, is the first time that this is happening. We have a government that is openly testing the boundaries of obedience to the rule of law, violating court orders, ignoring branches of the government, just like slave-owning Southern oligarchs did over 160 years ago. 500 years ago, Africans were rounded up in their countries and put on transports and taken out of their country to some other place far away. The past few months, this country's government has rounded up people, put them on transports, taken them out of this country, sent them someplace far away that many of them, they're not even from El Salvador. They just happen to have the same skin tone. I mean, not my skin tone, but they all have the same, roughly the same. They're brown dudes, basically, is what I'm getting at, if you weren't picking up what I'm putting down. We have broken treaty after broken treaty wiping out Native Americans. Things like the Trail of Tears, smallpox blankets, centuries of subjugation and brutality during slavery. We fought an entire civil war over slavery where rich, conservative, white oligarchs would rather have betrayed their country, would rather have killed American soldiers, and would rather have died than grant a black person equality. After that, we had segregation and domestic terrorism. I don't know where anyone else watching this video went to school, but until we face the reality of who and what we are, this is going to keep happening and keep happening. We will keep struggling to rewrite history because we don't want our grandkids to find out what we did when they go to school. And so I'm crowdfunding this documentary web series because I've spent the last 8 or 9 years unlearning all of the things that I learned in U.S. schools, things that I was taught as the great-great-great-grandson of George Alfred Trinum, the aforementioned Secretary of the Treasury of the Confederacy, who owned a number of properties that held enslaved people in bondage. Part of this is my effort to show what I've learned from where I started and where I am now. But also, this documentary web series aims to help other people unlearn things that they learn, or learn things that they'd never otherwise know about in this period of history that we keep trying to erase. I want to help debunk a lot of the myths and legends and lies about the Civil War. It aims to tell stories that people have probably never heard about. The first woman to lead a U.S. military operation was Harriet Tubman, the same Harriet Tubman whose name is synonymous with the Underground Railroad. The same Harriet Tubman whose name disappeared from government websites because of Pete Whiskey Leaks, Keg Breath, DEI initiatives. There's this pervasive myth in the South among neo-Confederates and Lost Cause apologists about how General Sherman is a war criminal because of the things that he did to Georgia and the Carolinas, and how the South was more noble than that. But they don't talk about things like the Battle of Honey Springs, where Union soldiers were scalped. They don't talk about the Battle of Poison Springs or the Battle of Fort Pillow, where Confederate soldiers murdered black Union soldiers who were captured. They don't acknowledge the horrors of slavery, the brutality and the rape and the destruction of families and lives. So that's why I'm doing this documentary web series, and I would appreciate your support. If you haven't already contributed, there are a wide range of pledges starting at $5. 10% of our YouTube following alone, just donating $5 and we'd be across that finish line. And I ain't too proud to beg. If you've already contributed, I appreciate your contribution. I would appreciate you sharing the campaign link on all of your socials. I'll be unveiling the design for our crowdfunding t-shirt this weekend. This is a special one-of-a-kind t-shirt that will only be available to backers at certain levels. There will also be a variant that's only available at higher levels. And let me reassure everyone, just because I'm cranking out Sherman cosplay videos making fun of Confederates and talking about actual American patriots and other historical events and locations doesn't mean that I'm not standing up here on my cell phone camera making rant videos. I've got at least 2 more simmering on the back burner in my brain, probably coming up this weekend. Y'all be safe out there this weekend. Stay frosty. Heads on a swivel. Quick pivot. If you like following gamers on Twitch, the Sons of Liberty has a Twitch account, and I'll be looking at how to incorporate some of our gamers who are in the fam of Liberty so that they can stream on the Sons of Liberty Twitch. I will also be streaming some Star Citizen every now and then, and for the handful of people that submitted applications to join Black Widow Company because you saw me playing the game, I've responded to your applications and with some instructions. That's my time for today. Big Sarge out here. 2 claps and a Rick. The Confederate flag is a participation trophy. Admin Tim316 says, get fucked and die mad about it. Hashtag not sorry, not sorry. Woo!
And now it's time for the Throatpunch!